Prime Minister Narendra Modi's departure that has been confirmed for Russia with the visuals that are coming in. And in the next few hours, as he will be landing in Kazan, where Russia is now the host for BRICS Summit 2024. But a statement has already come for Prime Minister Modi. I'm going to quote from here now. Talks on economy, climate will be on agenda. To strengthen India-Russia strategic ties will also be significant. BRICS is a key platform for dialogue. So that's the latest statement that is coming from Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And remember, this is going to be important because this is an alliance that is of Brazil, India, Russia, China. More and more nations have come in. But there's no United States of America, there's no United Kingdom, there are no Western allies. And therefore, is this also a new political order could be emerging that we are looking at? So as Prime Minister Narendra Modi is currently en route to Russia, remember that the Indian ambassador to Russia, Vinay Kumar, also had said that because India is a founding member of BRICS, it's committed to economic cooperation within the framework and has a very foundational principle. BRICS primarily focuses on trade and technology, but amid what we have seen, remember, at a time when the war is on between Russia and Ukraine, there is also, of course, the situation in Middle East, West Asia. A lot of Middle Eastern nations have expressed that they need to and want to be a part of the BRICS. Specifically whether it's UAE, Saudi and other nations including Egypt. How and what role can India play at a time and a crucial juncture here in the global geopolitics will be very important. A stable economy, a rising power, an own independent foreign policy, friends with Russia, friends with Ukraine, also trying to sit on the table with China, which has now in many ways become an arch rival. Focus has been also as much about Putin and Modi meeting, but will be as much interesting to see if the Xi Jinping Modi meeting takes place. Our Foreign Affairs Editor Geeta Mohan is joining me on the phone line. Geeta, so what time possibly the big events are going to begin? The Putin-Modi meeting, possibly the Xi Jinping-Modi meeting too?
Well, that's right. We have one confirmation, that is the Putin-Modi meeting, meeting, and that is going to take place as the first bilateral. In fact, the first event that takes place after he arrives in Kazan and goes to his hotel, where there will be community members who will be there in community to welcome him. After which, there is going to be a bilateral meeting with President Putin. Prime Minister Modi, in his departure statement, has already emphasized the need for and a review of the strategic partnership between the two countries. It was not so very long ago, Pujat, that the two leaders met. So there is only forward movement that they'll be looking at, review of how they're taking the relationship forward. But like you rightly said, there are other bilaterals that have been slotted but have not been assigned yet. And we will have to see who those leaders are who he's going to meet. There certainly is a lot of conversation on an Iran-India meeting. So he could be meeting Pezeshkian, the president of Iran as well. But like you said, it is the China-India meeting that is going to be crucial. Is that meeting going to happen or not? We know that the disengagement has happened and the patrolling will begin.
Yes.
But in terms of a statement that has to come from the Chinese side, we still await a statement from the Chinese side. It's the Indian side that has said that everything now looks towards positive movement and development, and a momentum has been created. But we still await what the Chinese side has to say. And all that will be visible should there be a meeting between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi, which has not happened in a very long time.
Geeta, either way, even if there are not direct bilaterals that will take place, do you think there will be a lot of economic cooperation that will be of the focus, specifically in the volatile times? I'm also looking at how the national currencies or the digital inclusion, all of that I've seen India do a lot of updates with in the past few years with other countries. All of that, do you think, is also going to be a focus in this?
Well, that's right. Bilaterals aside, these are bilateral meetings that we were talking about. Within the BRICS forum, there is going to be a lot of conversation on the economic front. BRICS is majorly an economic conglomerate where countries are coming together. You're seeing the voice of the global south, the faces of the global south in this grouping. And yes, they are going to talk about not just how to cooperate with each other, but also within the BRICS, we have the BRICS Bank, we have local currency swaps, how to exchange and how to do trade in the local currencies, or a BRICS currency that has been in conversation for a very long time. All that will be discussed. And yes, if you look at the grouping and you see how there are many players who are not pro-West, they are looking at how to de-dollarize an economy where US sanctions hit them the most and hurt them the most. Russia and China and
That's
Iran
correct.
especially. So that is going to be a major part of the BRICS forum conversation.
So, I mean, it's anyway very fascinating because the kind of nations who are involved here, Brazil, India, China, Russia, more and more nations, approximately 30, could actually be getting added on when we include the Middle East. Geeta, stay on with me because with this BRICS summit in Russia, Prime Minister Modi already en route. 16th BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia becomes the host. Prime Minister Modi definitely will be holding a bilateral talk with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And remember, there's a certain friendship, bonhomie, that both of them have developed over the years. But the fact is there's still a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. And it's been almost 20 months. There is already a worsening conflict in the Middle East. So what role can India, Russia play in global peace will be very important. The suspense remains, like you can see on your screens, the Modi-Xi Jinping bilateral. Will that happen? And is there more chances of happening in this time because of the discussions that have happened on the petrol arrangements along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh? There has been a decision to continue, possibly to de-escalate as much as possible. Putin, remember, has expressed appreciation, meanwhile, for Prime Minister Modi's concerns regarding the conflict, acknowledging that he's a friend, expressing gratitude for India's support in seeking a peaceful resolution to the war. When we are a friend of both Russia and Ukraine, can India play a mediator role here?
Ambassador, what do we expect from the Prime Minister's visit? What's top on his agenda?
The Prime Minister's visit is taking place for participation in the 16th BRICS summit, and there are a number of issues that BRICS is handling today. Economic development, furthering economic cooperation between the member states, in cooperation for reforming the global institutions, including the Security Council, giving greater voice to the global South, handling climate change. These are some of the most prominent issues that the leaders are expected to discuss during the summit.
As far as India and Russia are concerned, the Prime Minister was here in July and then he subsequently traveled to Ukraine. He's met both the presidents. Is there some forward movement or likely forward movement on exploring a roadmap for peace in the region?
The issue has been discussed and spoken about. As you know, India has consistently held the view that the concerned parties need to engage and find a resolution to this conflict by dialogue and diplomacy. So I cannot prejudge what the leaders will talk, but I won't be surprised if this issue is also discussed.
The Chinese side is wanting to restore the relationship between India and China to what it was earlier. It wants the other aspects of the relationship like trade, commerce, investment to move ahead. It will, of course, take some time to restore the trust between the two countries, but at least I think a beginning can be made, and perhaps there might be a meeting at the topmost level between the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, and the President of China, Mr. Xi Jinping, at Kazan in Russia. Now that the problems on the border along the LAC have been sorted out, I think there is a very high probability that our Prime Minister Modi, and the President of China, Xi Jinping, could have a bilateral meeting in Kazan.
India Today's managing editor Gaurav Sawant is presently in Russia. He's joining me right now. Gaurav, of course, the focus and interesting highlight could be the India-China aspect, but there's one confirmation, and that is about Putin and Modi meeting. But it's also amid the war. So what can we expect from the Modi-Putin meeting and the bilateral, Gaurav?
It's a very crucial day here at Kazan, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin becomes extremely interesting and newsworthy. Remember, the Prime Minister had met the Russian President when he came here for a bilateral in July. They'd had a 5-hour-long meeting during that bilateral on the 8th of July. Subsequently, the Prime Minister had traveled to Ukraine, had a very long meeting with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and now is back here. So there are multiple ideas, we are told, that the two have discussed, and based on those ideas, there is likely to be forward movement on the peace plan between Russia and Ukraine. Of course, India has constantly said India is in favor of any conflict resolution through dialogue and diplomacy because no solution will be found in the battlefield. It leads to a lot of loss of life and money. The effort should be to find a solution through dialogue and diplomacy. That is something where the two sides are likely to move forward, with India offering a helping hand as long as it's required by both sides. That's point one. Point two, remember Prime Minister Narendra Modi had also raised the issue of some Indians who'd been misled into fighting for the Russian army in Ukraine. Now, I'm told that 90 Indians have been since sent back. Some, of course, unfortunately had lost their lives. Their mortal remains are being repatriated, and the effort is on for the remaining 17. Approximately 17 is the number that India's ambassador to Russia, Ambassador Vinay Kumar, put it when I spoke to him, that 17 more are likely to be repatriated. As and when more information comes in, India takes it up with Russia, and with the personal intervention of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian President Vladimir Putin, Indians are being sent back, those who were fighting as mercenaries or had been misled into fighting Russia's conflict with Ukraine. On the field, you know, in the areas of science, technology, defense cooperation, people to people, students, cultural exchanges, it's a very wide arena, business to business, Indian hospitals here in Russia. There are so many areas where the two countries are collaborating and cooperating and having conversations about how to expand that relationship. That's also something that the two leaders will review.
Interesting. Stay on with me, Gaurav, because Geeta Mohan also continues to be with us. Geeta, it's going to be interesting on the role that India can play. Of course, there's economic cooperation, trade and technology, but cannot ignore the fact that there's currently for over 20 months literally a war going on in that region.
Well, absolutely. And in that war, we've seen the West having put enough pressure on many countries to take sides. And India has not. India has stuck to its all-time friend and partner, and not just stuck to it, but strengthened the relationship with Russia in many ways than one, whether it's oil diplomacy, the oil trade between the two countries, or for that matter, even now, when they're looking at further enhancing the strategic partnership between the two countries. So there is no weaning away from Russia. What we are looking at is choosing that middle path where we're willing to engage with the West and willing to engage Russia as also. And now we're looking at maybe a better, more forward-looking relationship with China as well. So let's wait and see what happens with China. But with Russia, there's absolute clarity on what India's position and foreign policy stance is when it comes to not taking sides, remaining non-aligned, and yet being aligned in many ways when it comes to strategic partnership with Russia. So there is going to be a lot of conversation on that front. And yes, the Russia-Ukraine war, like you rightly pointed out, is going to be a very important part of that entire conversation with President Putin. Prime Minister Modi in India has been very clear that war is not the way forward. India could press upon that yet again. And in many ways, Pooja, interestingly, it's the West that hailed this entire statement of India, where they say that every time they go, India is pushing for peace. And Russia also similarly has been hailing Prime Minister Modi. President Putin only during an interaction ahead of BRICS with some editors had said that India's position is very, very good, because every time they talk about Russia-Ukraine war, they also put forth Russia's position. So both sides are hailing Prime Minister Modi and India's position. However, we'll have to wait and see whether if war is not the way forward, but what then can be or bring about peace is something that both sides will be looking at. And the world is watching in terms of whether if there can be some forward movement towards Russia and Ukraine going back to the negotiating table, because the peace plan that Volodymyr Zelensky has put out has been outrightly rejected by Russia. There is going to be no forward movement, and the plan or negotiating table that Russia is asking Ukraine to come on without any preconditions.
Geeta, stay on with me, because what I find very interesting is, of course, and I'm sure it's not just India, the fact is there's going to be a lot of focus on Prime Minister Modi as well. Geeta, Gaurav, please stay on with me, because why there is this specific interest, curiosity about Prime Minister Modi or India to be at the BRICS summit at this time? Remember this bilateral that Vladimir Putin is going to be amid Russia-Ukraine war, and India has been friends as much with Russia and Ukraine and has maintained an individual equation, independent policy with both the countries. But it was important to mention that Putin personally this time also invited Prime Minister Modi for the BRICS summit, for which all of these nations are a part. India is one of the founding members, but it also showcases how the leaders, Prime Minister Modi and Vladimir Putin, heading their respective nations, are also sharing this friendship and bond over the years. But India has been advocating conflict resolution through dialogue and diplomacy. The statement from Prime Minister Modi that this is not an era for war is also reflective of the kind of policy that we intend to follow. But it's going to be the first bilateral with the new Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian. This is important. Again, Middle Eastern conflict coming in. Iran, that's been facing about whether it's criticism or expectations if it's going to be a bigger role in the war in the Middle East and West Asia. And then, of course, the crucial talks, if that happens as a bilateral, with China's Xi Jinping likely. Remember, apart from China, though, India has been friends with Iran, with Ukraine, with Russia, with Brazil. But apart from that, can China and India also come on the table at this BRICS summit? And that's where I bring in India Today's Gaurav Sawant, who's already been in Kazan right now, and as Prime Minister is en route, about what precisely is going to be the situation on this. So I take that question to you, Gaurav. What do you think is possibly going to be the expectation from India about India at the BRICS summit?
Now, India is one of the key pillars of the BRICS. It started, you'd recall, with Brazil, Russia, India and China. And then subsequently South Africa joined. Now there are 5 new countries that are a part of BRICS, including Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Ethiopia. And there are others who want to join. The Russian President Vladimir Putin indicated that there are about 30 plus countries who are either joining as observers or special invitees. And there's a long list of countries that want to be a part of this grouping. It's a very, very crucial grouping, very important when it comes to economies, developing economies, rising economies of the world, and also, look at the large population, India and China alone, plus all the BRICS countries. So it's a very, very powerful grouping, which countries are at pains to explain. It's not an anti-West grouping. It's just a non-West grouping, that BRICS is. And India is a key pillar of this organization. So there is forward movement on multiple fronts where India is playing a critical role. Apart from that, India's role as a peacemaker in the world is being appreciated. And India's moving forward on trying to solve, playing a role in trying to solve the situation between Russia and Ukraine in West Asia. India has a huge population in that area. And India is able to resolve our own conflicts. So we lead by example, with a tense standoff with China. If India is able to resolve that, barring terror state Pakistan, which of course India has been able to handle post Pulwama with a Balakot airstrike and with a very hard stance that we've adopted with that terror state, an equally firm stance that India has adopted vis-a-vis an expansionist China. So at least an effort is on. We're leading by example, and there is hope that this forward movement will lead to one, growing economies. What is India saying? Peace and prosperity. For the world to prosper, you need peace, and dialogue and diplomacy is the best way forward. Conflict solves nothing. Perhaps we'll see a lot more movement on that just multiculturalism, multilateralism, and also peace and prosperity through dialogue and diplomacy.